Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Amber Ledberry, the Outreach Coordinator at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this action party to you today. While we give folks a few minutes to join, we've got a fun icebreaker for everyone in the chat. Our icebreaker this evening is where are you joining from and what first got you caring about climate? Was it a person, a book, a moment, or something else? Let us know in the chat. We're excited to hear. If you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so that we can all see each other tonight. We will be recording this action party and it will be available publicly online. So if you prefer not to appear, please just go ahead and turn your camera off. We'll be sending out the recording tomorrow. If this is your first ever action party, let me give you a quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn about important environmental issues from people who are experts in their fields. In the course of the hour, we'll take real meaningful action on climate together using the CAN Action Carousel. The CAN Carousel makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to business leaders and political decision makers, offering an endless stream of actions, measuring your personal impact, and letting you earn points towards the planting of real trees. So just give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen and show you just how easy it is to take action. One moment, you should be seeing my screen momentarily. All right, I think you should see my screen now.
We do.
Perfect. So this is the CAN Action Carousel. You'll see we've got all kinds of actions here, everything from petitions to articles you can read, videos you can watch, and of course, messages that you can send to your elected officials. Here's one that looks good. So every action card has a title in the middle, which tells you exactly what you'll be doing. In this case, it's tell your federal representatives to protect state and local pesticide restrictions. If you look at that and you're like, I don't really know what that means, don't worry, you can always click the Why button down here. It'll give you a brief description of what this action means, as well as some sources you can check out to get a little more context on the action. All right, as you'll see, it only takes 3 clicks to take action. First, you're going to click Do It Now. And then you're going to choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're reaching out to. Because I've put in my address before, it knows who my federal, state, and if you live in a city with more than 100,000 people, it'll know your local officials. Then all you have to do is hit send message. You'll see the message here, hit send message again, and you've taken action. Earlier, I mentioned earning points towards a real tree. So far, the Climate Action Now community has planted over 600,000 trees together, which is pretty incredible. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Brett Walter, the CEO and founder of Climate Action Now, and he's going to get you started taking action tonight. Over to you, Brett.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you everybody for showing up tonight. I'm so excited. I've been waiting for a couple of months for this, and so happy to meet Bernadette and Dr. Hayhoe, who I've been a big fan of for so many years. So the way we're going to get going here is I'm going to show you a special screen. All right. Does that look good, Amber?
It does. We can see it.
This is on the left side of the screen is our goal tracker. So this is a very cool little gizmo that as you take action in the carousel, that number in the middle will increment. And when we've hit our goal of 400, that will reveal the entire picture of the blue marble. That's a famous NASA photo. And we'll have a little surprise for you when that happens. But on the other side of the screen is a QR code, and below that is a link. Either one of those will take you to the action carousel for tonight on the Climate Action Now website. So if you prefer to take action on your laptop, all you have to do is type in that URL at the bottom, or actually, Amber, I think you're going to put the link to the action carousel in the chat, right?
Yep, it's in the chat now for anyone who
Okay,
wants
so all you have to do is click that link in the chat. Now, if you prefer to take action on your phone, then just take out your phone and open your camera app and point your camera at that QR code as if you're going to take a picture of it, and a little pop-up will appear, and touch that pop-up, and that will take you to the action carousel on your phone. So you can be watching the conversation on your laptop while you're taking action with your phone. Now, if you've never used the carousel before, you'll have to put in some basic information, specifically your name, address, and email. And that's necessary so that we can look up your elected official for you. Um, and so there'll be a minute or two of that. And actually, when you're on the carousel, you'll see there's a profile. And if you want to go ahead and just drop down that profile, you can enter in that basic information right there. And then once you've done that, you're good to go. The app will know your address, so it's going to know who your federal officials are, your state and city, and so on, as we described. If you're already a CAN app user and you're using Carousel for the first time, don't worry, it'll recognize your email. It'll ask you for a verification code. And once and email you a verification code, once you get the verification code, that will link the Carousel to your app. So you can use there going forward, you can use the app, you can use the Carousel, it doesn't matter. It all goes to the same place. So that's that. And if you have any trouble with any of this, don't sweat it. It's totally cool. Concentrate on the conversation. Concentrate on the conversation anyway. If you don't want to take any action, don't take any action. Maybe you just want to listen. But here's the thing. Tomorrow, Amber will send you a link to the recording of this event. So if you'd rather take action tomorrow, it'll still be there, and you'll have the link that you need and the information that you need in order to do that. So our initial goal here is to hit 400 actions by the end of the hour. Let's do our best, and back to you, Amber.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. All right. If anyone has any trouble getting started taking action, please just let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to help you join. We're now going to move into our panel discussion. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Jessica Craven. Jessica is a community organizer, activist, and elected member of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. She's the author of Chop Wood, Carry Water, a daily actions newsletter that she's published 5 days a week since 2016. A longtime grassroots volunteer and climate activist. She is also a political content creator and correspondent for Courier News. As you hear from our speakers tonight, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat. And just a reminder, you're welcome to continue taking action in the carousel while we hear from our panelists. Jessica, over to you.
Hi, thank you. It's so nice to be here, everybody. Wow, I never thought I would see this many people on a Zoom about climate. This is great. Welcome. All right. Well, I am here to introduce to you, first of all, let me just say, I am a huge fan of Climate Action Now. I love their app. I love their carousel. It's the most incredible organization. And as a climate activist, it is a bright spot of hope in what can sometimes be a slightly discouraging space, but not always. And not always because of people like the wonderful women we have speaking today. So let's hop into that. I'm going to tell you who our two panelists are today. We have Dr. Katharine Hayhoe and Bernadette Woods Placky. So Dr. Katharine Hayhoe is one of the world's most celebrated climate scientists and communicators. She is the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy and author on multiple U.S. national climate assessments and the host of the PBS series Global Weirding. Her best-selling book, Saving Us, and her weekly Substack newsletter, which I subscribe to, Talking Climate, have made her one of the most widely reaching voices in climate today. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people, and Fortune named her one of the 50 greatest leaders in the world. Whoa! Welcome, Katharine. Welcome. We can pull you both up here soon, hopefully. And then Bernadette Woods Placky is an Emmy award-winning meteorologist who has spent her career connecting everyday weather to the broader climate crisis. She spent more than a decade in local TV news and has helped transform weather broadcasts into a powerful vehicle for climate education. She's presented on global stages, including COP21, COP or COP21, I think it's COP21 in Paris, and serves on the National Academy Board of Atmospheric Science and Climate. Welcome, Bernadette. Yay! It's so great to have you both here today. Okay, I'm going to start out with a question for both of you that I think will launch us into a great conversation. You have both spent your careers not just studying climate change, but communicating it to everyday people. From that experience, what do you think is the most important thing an individual can do to tackle climate change? And Katharine, just because I introduced your bio first, we're going to start with you.
All right. Well, it is such a pleasure to be with you here today. I see a number of familiar names. I would just like to tell everybody a little shout out because everybody's putting where they're from. I am from Toronto. I see quite a few Toronto people in the chat. I live in Dallas. I see a lot of Dallas people also there. And I'm also very fond of New Mexico too. So hello to people from there as well. Um, when when we talk about climate change, one of the biggest questions I get as a climate scientist today is, what can I do? And 9 times out of 10, the answer you will get if you ask anybody that question is about how to reduce your personal carbon footprint. But here's some shocking news. Not so shocking to those of you familiar with this climate action app, but for most people, they don't know that reducing your carbon footprint isn't the same as tackling climate change. To tackle climate change, we have to change the system. And to change the system, the most powerful thing we have is not what we eat, it's not what we drive, it's not what we put on our roof. It is what we say. It is the power of our voice to catalyze change. That is how systemic change happens.
That is very powerful. And Bernadette Woods.
Well, this is why Katharine and I work so closely together. I'm going to go in this direction too. First of all, I mean, there are just so many amazing people on here. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I put it earlier, but there's so much going through here. So I am coming to you from Ewing, New Jersey. Any other Jersey people out there? I'm originally from Upper Darby, not too far away, but I did jump around a few different times during my TV life. I lived in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Lexington, Kentucky, and then a lot of time in Baltimore before coming up here to New Jersey. So along these same lines, we've spent so many years focused on the science and on the really accelerating solutions that we have in front of us. This massive gap that we see, which is a solution that every single one of us can use today, is our voice. And it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. It's how you ask questions. It's how you build community. It's how you learn what's going on and what else can be done. And as Climate Action Now does so beautifully, they help us understand that actions are what drive us toward hope, toward community, toward something positive together to get toward that systems change that Katharine's talking about. And this is a thing that every single one of us have the ability to do and to do today. And I'm going to put a link also in here. Many of you are familiar with this, but not everyone. So I want you to understand the Yale Climate Opinion Maps. This is research that goes back to 2008 by Yale and George Mason University. And what they've done is surveyed the American public on a variation of questions around climate change, beliefs, behaviors, and there are about 30 questions. You can toggle around the top of this. They've downscaled the data into these maps, and you'll see overwhelmingly people know there's a problem. They do support a lot of the actions around this, but nobody talks about it.
No.
The numbers are extraordinarily low, and that's why this is so powerful. So I'm going to put that link in here for everybody.
And I'm going to add a link for some Canadian data.
Ooh, we love links. All right. So, Katharine, going back to you, given disinformation, political polarization, and a public consumed by other crises, I think especially in the United States right now, we understand that it is like drinking from a fire hose all the time. Is there still a point in talking about climate? What's the actual evidence that it works?
Oh my gosh. Well, yes, there is, because we still aren't doing it. If you look at those Yale climate opinion maps that Bernadette just put in the chat, you will see that the majority of people are worried about climate change, about 2/3 in the US and even a higher number in Canada. But then, so I think of that as the head. So most people understand we have a problem. But when you ask people, will it affect you personally? The number drops. That's the heart. And then when you ask people, do you know what to do about it? Most people have absolutely no idea what to do about it. They think recycling is the most important thing they can do. They don't even go to the plant-based burgers. They're still stuck on recycling. So having these conversations is absolutely essential, but there's a couple of buts there. I am not talking about loading up with all the scariest scientific facts that you can find and going out and picking a fight with Uncle Joe or your neighbor who's always posting on Facebook that climate change isn't real. That is not what I'm talking about. Because those 10% who are dismissive, who I define as if an angel from God appeared before them with tablets of stone saying global warming is real, they would reject the angel. Arguing with them, first of all, wastes our time. And second of all, it actually hardens their opinion rather than changing it. So when I say we need to talk about it, I'm not talking about arguing with Uncle Joe. I'm talking about having a conversation, especially with the vast majority of people who are worried, but they don't understand how it affects them and they don't know what to do. So that brings me to my second but. We often assume that because people aren't talking about it, they're not worried. But in fact, if you're worried and you don't know what to do, most people don't want to talk about it. And most people actually fall into that category. So if someone's not worried, obviously you want to make them worried, right? They need to wake up, smell the smoke. There's a problem. But if they're already worried and they don't know what to do, more scary information is actually going to paralyze them. And actually, that is exactly what's happening in Canada. In Canada, our level of concern over climate change is going down because people are so worried over the horrible wildfires we've been having, and they don't think anything that the government was doing was working on climate change, even though it was. No one was telling them it wasn't, or it was working, but nobody was telling them it was. That our levels of concern have started to drop because we don't understand what we can do about it. So when we have these conversations, we need to help people make the head to heart connection, not only what's happening, but why it matters to my family, my child with asthma, my insurance rates, the price of groceries, the fact that it's so hot outside or something like that. And then we need to bring in the positive, constructive solutions, which is what this app is all about, right?
That's fantastic. And Bernadette, what's your take? Do you want me to repeat the question or?
Could you please?
Yeah,
I'm so excited by
you know.
all of these amazing people.
So the question was, given disinformation, political polarization, and a public consumed by other crises, is there still a point in talking about climate? What's the actual evidence that it works?
Yes, for many reasons. One, our climate's going to keep on changing. So we need to deal with this. And if we don't, it's going to be at a level that we can't adapt like we can today. So one, we have to. Two, there is evidence that it works in many different ways. I'll take one example. Working with the Climate Matters program for most of my career in climate is how we built out working with TV meteorologists and journalists. And we did some published research around this, showing that when you brought climate into a weathercast in ways that connected with people in their community, whether it was how there are more hot days in Columbia, South Carolina, or more carbon dioxide is leading to more poison ivy, or we're getting longer, stronger allergy seasons. These daily life experiences on top of the extreme weather, when you made those connections in ways that mattered, people learned, were interested, were concerned. The thing is, we have to crank the volume. So we know this works, we just don't have enough of it. There are some amazing groups like Climate Action Now, and many of the people on here are coming from some amazing groups too. But the thing is, we need to better connect. We need to better collect and build out our range of climate connected communicators. And we need to crank that volume so that we can break through the noise. At the same time, mis and disinformation is its own real legitimate threat, even outside of just the noise, right? And there are ways to chase mis and disinformation. There are some strategies, and we can get into those. But the thing is, too, is if we're not speaking up, if we who are grounded in this aren't the ones adding real information to the chaos, then who is? People are really going to be confused. So yes, we do need to, and it does work.
Amazing. And the word climate has become a culture war trigger for many Americans. You can't even say it without getting, it becomes very contentious. So should advocates avoid it altogether in some contexts, or does sidestepping the word concede too much ground? Katharine, we'll start with you.
I'm a big fan of just using plain words. And you are right, climate change has become so politically polarized that sometimes just those words are enough to sort of turn off the conversation. And it isn't just about the political polarization, it's about the fact that it's so depressing. Some people don't want to talk about it just because it is so depressing, because again, they don't know what to do about it. So I am a big fan of just using the actual words to talk about what's happening. And often a way I start a conversation is, do you feel like the weather's getting weirder? And I live in Texas, I haven't had a single person say no. In fact, most people will hasten to explain to me just how weirder the weather has gotten in great detail. And when we talk about solutions, I don't talk about, how we need mitigation solutions. I talk about how we need energy and we can get energy in new clean ways. And I talk about what those clean ways look like. So using plain language is really important. And although I'm a climate scientist and I certainly call it climate change enough, I don't always use those terms. In fact, sometimes I'll tell you two examples. One time I was speaking to a group of farmers about how climate was changing and it was affecting their yields out here in West Texas. And at the end, one of the farmers came up to me and he said, "Well, I agree with everything you said, but if I agree with you, then I have to agree with Al Gore, and I can't do that." So, so he was just basically kind of explaining how the political term was something that he just couldn't get on board with because it was against his identity. So then I got to speak to a group of water managers next, and I decided I wasn't even going to use the word climate change. I was going to talk about variability and long-term trends, but show all the same data and talk about all the same things otherwise. And at the end, this woman came running up to me and she grabbed my hand and she shook it like this. And she was like, "That was great. I agree with everything you say. Those people who talk about global warming, I don't agree with them at all. But this makes sense." And so that taught me the power of just using plain English words or whatever language you speak. You can do it in Spanish as well or any other language. Just using plain words to say that the weather is getting weirder and my insurance bill is going up and my child has had more asthma this year and I'm worried about that. Are you worried too? Let's talk about what we can do about it.
Interesting. I heard, and we'll Bernadette, we'll get to you in a second, but I remember hearing in one polling, and it might have been with Yale Climate, because I get an email from them, that even using the word pollution, it's not the same thing, but that just talking about how pollution is getting worse will sometimes loop in people on the right who can't talk about climate, but are worried about clean air and water. And since dirty air does exacerbate climate crisis, it kind of amounts to the same thing. I don't know. It was just another thing I thought was interesting. But Bernadette,
Yes, you're right.
talk to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really is who you're talking to, how and when and where, right? There are those conversations where if you're prompting the conversation, sadly, climate change is affecting everything around us. So there are many points of entry, and often the point of entry is around something that you're already discussing. I mean, I bring this up often, but I go to Penn State. I went to Penn State. I go to Penn State football games. My tailgate doesn't always vote like me, but there have been times where they were plugging in the generator to watch some games while we were at our tailgate, and the Ford F-150 had just come out, right? I'm like, you need a Lightning. I mean, the F-150 Lightning. I know the 150 was there, but you need a Lightning, and this is why. And all the talking points I got back were around exactly what I predicted. Everything we would predict, everything we hear in the sphere. And I said, well, no, and this is why, or no, and this is why. So it was this amazing entry point that had nothing to do with climate or anything like that. But that's connecting on a shared value, right? Or if you're with other parents at a sporting event, right? If it's an outdoor event and it is around weather or something else, right? There is a point that's in. I mean, I'm a meteorologist, so I go weather often. But also, even if you're just, I say just, it's not just. If you're traveling, you're sitting at that airport bar, sitting at a restaurant, right? People say, what do? You explain what you do. That question goes to, is it real? So that's a different point of entry. And in that case, I tackle it head on, and then I can navigate who they are in a different way. You say, okay, well, tell me more about why you think that or where you're coming from. And then you can find your entry point there. So it is slightly different whether the language has already been out there. But this is one of the challenges I see around that specific wording too, isn't that it's good or bad or this or that, is that question was put out in the 1980s. And sadly, that is the question some people are still asking, not why does it matter? What can I do about it? How can we move forward on this? It's, is it or is it not? And so once you pose that question too, then the answer's there and it's done. The conversation doesn't really, you have to bring it further in different ways, right? So it's like, that's yes or no. And, but this is an example of why we need to bring it further than just, is it or is it not happening, right? And is climate change real or not? I mean, so many people are really still stuck there. And that's where, if they bring up that specific wording, it's a chance to move it along.
But along those lines, I should note that although the majority of the objections that we hear are sciencey sounding objections, like, is it real? Is it human caused? Is it bad? 99% of the time, it's solution aversion that is driving their questions. 99% of the time, they've been told that the solutions to climate change are antithetical to their ideology, to their identity, or just to our quality of life. And I'm very sorry to say that some environmentalists have actually been complicit in that. There's a very strong sort of Puritan streak in terms of, you're not really fixing climate change unless you're suffering. Deprivation and sacrifice is the only way to fix this. And if you aren't depriving yourself and others of something, and if you aren't sacrificing, then you're not doing climate action right. And so we've actually, unfortunately, contributed to that perspective. And we humans fear loss more than we value gain. And so whenever anyone has questions about climate change, I'm always happy to answer them. And one of my favorite programs is a program that trains hairdressers to have climate conversations. I mean, you have a captive audience, right? It's the perfect place. Whenever anyone wants to have a conversation, though, I always keep in mind the fact that they don't know that there are climate solutions that work. Most people do not know that. Most people are aware that climate is changing. 2/3 of people in the US are worried about it, but they don't understand how it affects them, and they don't think there's solutions that work. So regardless of what question people ask me, I always bring in the fact that there are solutions that work that they can get on board with, because I know that that's addressing the underlying issue.
That is so interesting. Wow, I love this. Yeah, this is really fascinating. And then so let's say you've got someone in your life who you can't avoid and you don't want to avoid, who really wants to have the conversation, who just doesn't believe. Is there a way to talk to them without blowing up the relationship, or do you just try to avoid?
If they're the 10% dismissive, so the Yale program on climate change communication has this really helpful way to break people up into not believers and deniers. I don't like those terms at all. First of all, climate change is not a religion. There's no belief required. And second of all, denier really sort of draws a line in the sand and puts people on one side of it. So they put people across 6 categories: alarmed and concerned, 2 biggest categories; cautious, next biggest; disengaged, tiny; and then doubtful and dismissive. The dismissive are about 10%, and if you argue with a dismissive person, it will strengthen their objections. So arguing with them makes it worse. So if you know somebody dismissive in your life, and a dismissive person is obsessed with talking about how climate change isn't real or it's just a hoax, they're obsessed with it, they're post about it on Facebook all the time, the best thing to do is just say, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Now, how about those Cubs? Or if it's your family member, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Now, how about those Montreal Canadiens? But if it's anywhere else down the line, not dismissive, then beginning a conversation with what they care about, like Bernadette said, not what you care about, what they care about, and connecting the dots to a positive, constructive solution can absolutely move the needle.
Bernadette, what about anything else?
It's my dad. He passed a couple of years ago, but till the end, he still challenged climate change. And he would do so openly on my Facebook page. And it was connected with people like Katharine and other scientists. And my sister would call out my dad. She'd be like, Dad, stop. These are the experts. So I mean, I've lived it, but I would still go there at times. Did I think I was going to change him? No. But that's the thing, is I'll still engage him. I'll still answer questions, or I'll bring up points where and when appropriate. I mean, we had a very shared interest on many things, including Philadelphia sports. And so, if it was extraordinarily hot and I would point out, this is not normal, something is going on here, I would continue to do that through to the end. But the point being is that you can still, the relationship's super important, right? You don't want to give up people for this, but there are ways still to get at points that are connected to questions they may have, but don't go in thinking, I'm going to change this person per se. You may be able to open them up to different opportunities in different ways. Or, for example, my dad understood that we got electric vehicles and we were able to talk about that and the solar panels and things like that, and how that was saving money and I didn't have to rely on gas prices. So there are places to go, and people that may not ever change from that bubble we were talking about in the global warming 6 Americas still might be open to some of these other things. You just can't say, I'm going to change their opinion. You can still engage them. If there's someone you love and care about, you want to bring them into your sphere and still include them in things, not disclude them, but you just have to be realistic in how and where.
And on the encouraging side, I was just talking with the chief scientist of the United Nations Environmental Program this morning, and she's from Australia, and she was sharing that she comes from a very politically conservative family in Australia, that when she started her job as an environmental scientist, I mean, now she's the head of UNEP, they thought she was out to lunch. They thought that nothing she was doing was real. And just year after year, after decade of, like you said, Bernadette, building that relationship, now she says they're on her case for not fixing climate change fast enough. And I'm like,
Wow.
what a 180. Now, the 180s won't always happen, but Margaret has a really good point in the chat. And she said that research also shows that when you engage, that there's others listening. So, for example, I often don't think I'm going to change the mind of somebody who's trying to argue with me, but if there's other people listening, they're the ones who want to know what we're saying. And then David said, it's hard to believe that disengaged is such a small group. That's because most people don't want to talk about it. So we assume they're disengaged, but they're not. People can be very alarmed, they can be very concerned, or they could even be cautious, but they don't want to talk about it because it's depressing, they don't want to start a fight, and they don't know what to say.
And David, that hits at the point of why I went to the audience right away. It is the golden rule of all communication. So even in conversations or in a big formal setting, the golden rule is know your audience, right? And so that's why those Yale climate opinion maps are so critical, and the global warming 6 Americas category breakdown. It every year when they update the research, I'm like, okay, time to update my slides. I mean, it's at the beginning of almost every slide deck for that reason. It's the biggest misconception in climate change is we think people don't care. And that's how we enter every conversation. If you think someone doesn't care about something, you kind of step around it, or you may ignore it, or you sidestep or slow, or you come in with this like passive, like, well, I kinda. Whereas if you know people actually care, you come in with like, did you see this newest EV? Or did you see how much we saved in our solar panels? So you just approach everything from a very different level. So that's why it is so critical that people understand that people care. That is so important. And then you can start from that foundation.
Jessica, if you that was wonderful. I just want to break in here a second. Congratulations, everybody. We hit our goal of 400 action.
Woo!
Thank you so much for doing that. And this has been really interesting for me. I'm just going to make one little editorial comment, because for the last 5 years, Climate Action Now has been making it possible for folks like you to talk about climate. And this would be interesting. Let's turn this into a question to Katharine and Bernadette. You know what, people who use the app and the carousel, you know what their most common question is? Anybody want to take a guess? The answer is, do my messages make a difference? Does my opinion, this is it, does my opinion matter? And it took me, and we would say, yeah, we pointed to Congressional Management Foundation study that said, yeah, right after visiting your congressperson in person, the next best thing was personalized emails. And we give them the research and everything, but it never felt really satisfying. And finally, after 2 years, I came up with what I think is the answer. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the fossil fuel industry. Right? And look, you're all nodding. I've said this now 100 times, and everybody nods. How do we know this? We just know this, right? Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry knows this, which is why they spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year trying to shape public opinion with disinformation, right? And even dictators like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin know this, which is why they go to such great lengths to control the media. Everybody is terrified of public opinion. So don't tell me your opinion doesn't matter. But then the counter argument is going to be, well, okay, opinions matter, but my opinion alone doesn't matter. Okay. And that's true. Catherine's nodding. Yes, I agree. Your opinion alone doesn't matter, but you are not alone. And when you are using the app, you're using it with hundreds or thousands of other people who are also expressing their opinions. And people using the app express their opinions exponentially more times than people using conventional advocacy tools. So this is really the key. This is your opinion matters. And this is my contribution is, and then I'm going to shut up. Your opinion matters. It is your superpower. It is your superpower, and the app is your tool for expressing your superpower. So, okay, I'll shut up. I'm going to set a new goal, folks, but great conversation. And carry on, Jessica. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, not at all. I'm so glad we're making progress on our goals. So I am going to, since we're getting sort of to that point where I want to take some audience questions. So if you have questions for the panelists, please drop them in the chat. Amber will convey them to me. But I'm going to ask one question before, which is you've talked about how people need to hear that there are solutions, right? And you've talked about how people don't want to talk about climate change because they don't know what to do. So let's say I'm talking to someone and I've decided I am going to try to drop this into the conversation, right? I'm talking to someone at the airport. Doesn't the weather seem weird to you recently? And let's say they say, yeah, it really does. What's my next step if I'm trying to sort of, do what we're trying to do? Is it just talking about it? Is that all? Or am I going to try to squeeze in some of the ways that we can make a difference or some of the approaches that are out there? Do I need to be an expert on solar power and wind turbines? So talk to me about what the next step in that conversation looks like.
Okay, so let's role play. So I am at the DFW airport, and our flight just got delayed because there's bad storms. The person beside me sighs and rolls their eyes, and I say, wow, the weather's really getting weird, isn't it? And they're like, yes, this is like my third canceled flight. And I say, yeah, and you know what? Turbulence is getting worse too. Have you noticed? And they're like, oh my gosh, I've totally noticed that. It isn't just my imagination. I'm like, no, it's happening all across the US. And in fact, it's happening around the world. Turbulence is getting worse. You know why? And they're like, why? And I'm like, because there's more heat in the atmosphere. And I'm like, and that's why it's so hot outside too. And sometimes airplanes can't even take off. And so then they're like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? And I'm like, well, did you know that the DFW airport is the first airport in North America to be powered off clean energy? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yes, it is. It's got solar on the roof and it's got a lot of efficiency too. And did you know that here in Texas, segueing to the bigger picture, we have more wind energy and more solar energy than any other state? In fact, the only one who can beat us is China. And so you see, I've sort of segued right into all of these things that are related. And then you might say, well, how am I supposed to know all this stuff? You don't know all this stuff to begin with, and you don't have to be an expert. But this is why every week I have this newsletter called Talking Climate, where every single week I talk about good news about climate solutions, not so good news about how climate is affecting matcha tea harvests and air turbulence and your insurance rates and even increasing antibiotic resistance in drugs. And then I talk about something that we can do. And if you start absorbing this type of information long enough, and then of course we've got the good news, the good news update from the climate app, which is also an awesome Substack by Sam. And then Jessica, we've got your Substack as well, Chop Wood, Carry Water. So there's all these great ways that you can get this input to have these conversations, to be prepared. And people are fascinated by information about what's changing and why it matters. And there's so many solutions you can bring in. It just blows people's minds when they find out everything that's happening.
Bernadette?
So I let the conversation sometimes go to that, because if you get them to a point of what can we do, that's a really big step. That really is. And so there is that balance of the seriousness versus the hope. And there's some deep conversations in communication circles about how much hope, how much. you really need a little bit of all of it because people need to understand the seriousness, but they do need to understand what already exists and that we have the ability to do this. And so I help either guide that or let that conversation go in that way. And like Katharine said, if you say something about the weather being weirder or, wow, it's really hot today. I mean, it's amazing how many people talk about weather. I'm not going to lie because I have to say to people, full transparency, I'm a meteorologist because my answers are going to sound really weird to you. So it's then you can start getting into, and it doesn't just have to be about data and stats. It's just that I do really love weather. So I get excited about. So as I'm talking about them about weather, it's, yeah, we're breaking records. This is not normal. This did not used to happen like this, or didn't it happen like this in the past, or hasn't there? I said, not really. And then you can give that context. Or if you don't know all of that context, that's okay. You can say, you know what? I don't know all the details, but what I've seen is, or what I'm hearing is, I mean, you don't have to be the expert to put that in there. Anyone that's on here is probably already leaps and bounds ahead of someone else who's asking you a question about this. We know the weather is weirder. We know when you put heat in our atmosphere, it shakes everything up, right? Like a boiling pot of water, things start to get turbulent and they start to break down. So when you add more heat, a lot of things start to change. The weather's weirder. That leads to so many more things with our rising seas, with how it's changing negatively our water quality and our air quality and many of our health metrics. Also our availability for food, our availability for that water. So many of these things are right there, right in front of you to make a connection or to explore that connection with this person. Be like, you know, I don't know all the details about this, but I was reading this article or I was on this webinar, right? That's your entry. So that could be your next step. You don't have to be a scientist. That's that. Now to get to the solutions, when people say, well, what can we even do? Back to what Brett was talking about, or are we doomed? I get that too. Are we really doomed? So that next step and how you can guide it, one entry point I've done for that is where our emissions come from, and we got to bring them down to zero. Or, I mean, we got to balance them out, right? Like that's the goal. So the biggest source of emissions in the United States, transportation. We drive big things really far and we fly a lot. So we've got EVs, we've got other ways of doing things, right? So that's one. The other is our energy. Our energy, right? We know this. And so that's why there are solar panels and wind and this and that. So these are two real big obvious ones. And if someone says, well, I can't do that, everyone can talk. Absolutely everyone can use their voice. This is where they can go to ask more questions, to engage in more conversations. And you can even say that to them. If your conversation can go to that point, like don't be weird and forced, right? This is an authentic conversation. So if it goes to that point, it's, well, I challenge you, try to have 2 more conversations on climate change today, right? And see where that goes.
That's so great. And you can also tell anybody there's this great app that you can download for free and take action every day. That is like so awesome. You don't even have to know what to do. Just get this app and it'll help you contact your Congress members, and that this is
And
also
what's great
helpful,
about that app too is isn't just the actions you take through the app, it's the learning curve from the app, right? Because there are so many specific examples. And that's one of the things that's fascinating, especially when you get into adaptation. You know, you've got your mitigation, your adaptation, big geeky words, right? But our stopping of emissions and our dealing with what we've already done to our atmosphere. But when you get into it, it has to be local. Okay, let me rephrase it. Some of the local examples are the best examples. And so that's where you get so much more life and detail and energy out of some of these local examples. And just by seeing some of these local examples around the world, you can think about how that applies to your community or how you could be creative about that. So it is the learning curve in addition to the specific examples.
Love that. All right, let's get to a couple of audience questions. That was so fascinating. We have Elena, question for the speakers. Can you identify one common piece of disinformation, I assume created by the fossil fuel industry, that we can easily debunk in conversations?
Ooh. So first of all, there's not one piece. Skeptical Science has documented, I think, 258 sciencey sounding myths. So I'm not going to bother to go through those 258. You can just go to Skeptical Science. Bernadette will put the link in the chat right here. and you can check out all the responses. But here is the most insidious one that you're not going to find out there, that the fossil fuel industry perpetuated. So back about 30 years ago, a Swiss sustainability expert and a Canadian landscape architect, both people who are very concerned about sustainability, created a concept called the ecological footprint. And the ecological footprint essentially measures how much resources each of us uses and how many planets we would need if everybody lived like us. And I'm sorry to say that my life is 4.5 planets worth of resources. The average person is higher, about 6 in North America. And so the ecological footprint really points out that we are not living sustainably on our finite Earth. Now, what you might not know, though I know some of you do know this, is British Petroleum extracted the carbon footprint from the larger ecological footprint that looks like at land, water, and resources, and created a carbon footprint calculator to encourage people to measure their personal carbon footprint and focus myopically only on how to reduce their personal carbon footprint, which if each of us who cares enough and has the resources and the education and the time and the money enough to do it, does everything we can, we're still only going to cut our personal footprint by maybe up to 50%. And if all the oil companies merrily go their way in the meantime, we're not going to fix the problem. So the biggest, most insidious thing that they have done, and they continue to do, is to communicate that this is an individual action that we need to take to fix this. The head of BP a few years ago called out his daughters for buying fast fashion and people who buy strawberries out of season. When BP is, again, one of the responsible for, I think it's one of the top 10 companies responsible for the largest share of carbon emissions in the world. Shell put on Twitter a few years ago, back when it was called Twitter, they said, what are you doing to reduce your personal carbon footprint? Do you drive an EV? Do you eat a plant-based diet? Do you have solar panels on your roof? And they paid to boost that query that into my feed. Now, I don't go out of my way to troll people, but if they paid to boost into my feed, I was going to answer. So I responded and I said, when you tell me what you're doing to reduce your emissions, which exceed those of the entire country of Canada, Shell, I would be happy to tell you what I'm doing to reduce mine. They hid my response. So the whole idea that it is a personal choice for what we eat or what we drive or how we get our energy that is able to fix this whole problem is a myth created by the fossil fuel industry. Don't get me wrong. Is living according to our values important? It absolutely is. If we live in a high-income country, it's even more important because our choices have greater weight. I have wind energy. I didn't have a car for 3 years and just got a plug-in. I try out a new plant-based recipe every month. But I know the most important thing I can do is to have a conversation about it, because the slavery was not abolished because people boycotted cotton and sugar. Civil rights were not enacted because one person let people into their restaurant regardless of color. Those things mattered. Don't get me wrong, they matter, but they're not enough. What is enough is when we use our voices to catalyze societal change. That is the only way society has ever changed in the past. That is how women got the vote, how civil rights were enacted, how apartheid ended in South Africa. And it is how we can fix climate change today, as long as we don't fall for the myths of the fossil fuel industry.
That was very inspiring. That was incredible. Okay, I had a question back here. Amber, for some reason, I can't see just your messages, so they're all blended in with everyone else's. Somebody asked, how can we get, the specific question is lost, but I know the gist. How do we get climate change to become a top issue? And I definitely, I have been phone banking for presidential candidates since Al Gore. And I remember doing phone banks for him. And at that time, I was deeply concerned about climate change already. But most people were like, oh, it was so far down their list of priorities that they barely thought about it. And weirdly, it still seems to be pretty far down. How do we move it up, or do we need to move it up?
We do need to move it up. This is the ultimate challenge right now. We know people care. We know people want to take action. We know people support taking actions. It just consistently ranks low in priority for what people's challenges are. And when everyone goes to vote, they bring their own set of priorities with them, right? And in our system, it usually comes down to 2 people. And so you're balancing that on this system. So there are a lot of things at play. It just isn't rising in priority. The thing is, though, that even though we have a lot of this banked together on this pro side, this is where it comes back to using voices and talking. Because unless we make sure that our elected officials know we support this, they're not going to feel the pressure to do more. So that's one side. But I also want to say people can use this in their buying power too. This isn't just about politicians. That's a part of this. But the other side of this too is how we play out in our daily lives. You have every right to contact your bank, an advertising company, some of the big corporations that you go to, and ask questions. Ask them, say, what is your climate action plan? How are you prioritizing this? These are really important things to do. The more you can bring that up. When I used to rent a car about 5-6 years ago, I had already gotten my EV, but they weren't common in car rentals. So I knew the answer, but I'd say, do you have an EV? And they'd say, no, we don't. I said, well, when are you going to get one? Because I wanted to make sure they knew that was important to me. And so that's just one way of doing it. There's many ways you can do this, but using your voice. And then I also want to add one more piece of context here too, is one voice is how things can start and build. All of those examples Katharine said came from one person leading a charge, right? They always had a support mechanism around them, but they built off that. I mean, look at Greta Thunberg in climate action. She didn't even use her voice. She used a sign and just sat there. But look at how that built into a youth movement. So one voice is how you start. And that's how you build momentum. So one voice really does matter. And that's how we can make our importance heard. One other piece I'd add too, because there's many ways you can approach this, is we need people to understand that all those top voting priorities are connected to climate. And that is something that is still being lost in this world, is that the war going on right now, a fossil fuel war. Our food prices, a lot of it's connected to the drought. A lot of this AI and power is connected to climate and extreme weather shocks. So there's a lot around this that sadly, most of those things, our health, connected to climate change and at a higher risk going forward. So we need to make sure people understand that those things that are important to them, and if that's their top priority, sadly, climate is also one of them.
Katharine, do you want to throw in a last word here, because we are almost at time?
Yes, I just want to reinforce what Bernadette just said. So often we think of climate change as a separate bucket at the end of the row of all the buckets of things we care about. There's a lot of very knowledgeable people who think of it this way, even Bill Gates. He thinks of climate change as a separate bucket at the end. And so you might have a lot of very worthy buckets. You might have, obviously, you care about your family, you care about your community, you might care about education, poverty, equity, or more. And then you're like, okay, there's this climate bucket at the end. I just don't have, I don't have enough time or effort or resources to get to this bucket at the end. Climate change is not a separate bucket. It's the whole in every other bucket. If you care about your family's well-being, if you care about your community, if you care about hunger, equity, justice, poverty, nature, education, health, you name it. Name anything you care about, up to backyard hockey, and I can tell you exactly how climate change is the hole in that bucket. And so again, it isn't about making people care about climate change. It's about helping them see they already do, and they just didn't realize it.
Fantastic. Well, this has been an extraordinary conversation. I'm going to pass it back because I think we are almost at time, but thank you both so very much. I feel deeply inspired and hopeful, and like I'm going to go out there and talk to people about climate. I hope everybody else will as well.
And thank you, Jessica, because you do great work too. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. This was an awesome and engaging conversation. Before we wrap up, Brett Walter, the founder and CEO of Climate Action Now, is going to share a few quick updates for everyone here. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. And thank you so much, Jessica and Bernadette and Katharine. Amazing conversation. I actually learned a lot, which was really, really wonderful. I just have a few announcements and some opportunities for folks that I want to share. And I see my camera's gone blurry, so I'm going to bring it back. First of all, the action carousel that you are using tonight, action carousels like that are available to any organization for free. Any organization, a church congregation, a business, a nonprofit who wants to have an action carousel on their website, can have it up on their website in minutes. Minutes is literally all it takes. And if they have a Facebook group and they don't have a website, no worries, we can host it for them on the Climate Action Now website. Amber will put a link if you belong to one such organization and you want your organization's leaders to know about that. Amber's putting a link in there where people can go to ask for their own carousel for free. Secondly, I want to make sure that all of you know about Climate Action Now's hugely popular newsletter, Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope. And that's on Substack. And this newsletter provides a wonderful antidote to the doom and gloom of our times. Subscribe for free, and every day we'll deliver a short bit of hopeful news paired with an action that you can take in just 1 minute. And Amber will put a link to the daily dose in the chat. And while we're talking about Substack, be sure to check out Jessica's Substack, which is absolutely wonderful. Read it every day. And also Katharine's Substack, Talking Climate. And we can get a link in there for you as well as that. Also a wonderful, wonderful Substack. And finally, well, not finally, but just let me say, if, please consider becoming a Climate Action Now member. I'm a volunteer. Case Keen, our CFO, our entire management team, we're all volunteers, but we do have some really critical staffers who like to have a salary because they have to pay mortgages or rents. And we of course have expenses. And one way you can really help us continue to provide services like this would be to just become a member of Climate Action Now for as little as $9.95 a month. Amber will put a link in the chat for that. And finally, again, thanks to our wonderful panel and thanks to all of you for showing up today. This was really exciting for me. I've been looking forward to it for months. Now, before you run away, I mentioned our chief financial, Case Keen, made a music video for us. Unasked for, he just did it. We're going to share it with you. Amber will get that going here in just a second. And my final words to the panel, please feel free to watch the video. It's only like 3 minutes. It's wonderful. And then join me in the panel afterwards in the breakout room. There's a breakout room and it's called Panel Only. And we'll just spend a few minutes together to debrief. So once again, thank you, everybody. Great job. All of us, we're doing it. Let's keep going. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
There's a rhythm in the work we do, a rising chorus of me and you. From backyard gardens to distant seas, hope grows in the leaves of the trees. We teach, we reach, we light the way, a daily dose of hope each day, with hearts that care and hands that move. We're proving what a world can do. We can, we change the world, oh yes we can. Can-Doers raise their voices throughout the land, from solar projects to the trees we plant together. Technology drives the change we steer. Every action, every share sends a spark of hope out everywhere. At action parties loud and strong, heroes join and sing along. Every voice, every song keeps the movement marching on. We can, we change the world, oh yes we can. Can-Doers raise the voices across the land, protecting life where the wild things stand together. We can, we plant the trees and hope takes root, protect the land and keep skies blue. Solar makes the future bright, powering dreams into the light. Deserts bloom, the forests sing, habitat safe, the joy we bring. From north to south, from peak to sand, we shape tomorrow with our hands. We can, we change the world, oh yes we can. The people raise their voices throughout the land. From city streets to mountain spans, together we can, we can change the world, oh yes we can. For every child, for every land, hope is rising heart to hand. We can, we can, we can.
All right, that brings us to the end of our event. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be sending a email with a link to a lot of the things you saw in the chat today, and a link to the recording as well. Have a great night, everyone.